Well, good evening, everyone. I think everyone's connected to audio. Thanks for joining us tonight. We're going to talk and network around effective feedback strategies. You are with myself. My name is Heather Roderman, and I'm an assessment and instruction consultant with Wayne Risa. And I'll let Dr. Laura introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Gabrion. I'm a literacy consultant at Wayne Risa. Looking forward to working with you tonight.
So just a few Netiquette pieces. We ask that you mute your microphone, and this just helps us to hear one another when we talk. Consider wearing headphones or earbuds. It does reduce the feedback and the background noise. And then to save on bandwidth, consider turning your video off. But when we do get into breakout rooms and we do start to network with one another, we ask that you do put your video on if possible. That way we can see and interact with each other. And then I know we have a quick survey, and I think Michelle or Laura is going to throw it in the chat. We just ask that you complete that survey, and that helps us to put you into breakout rooms accordingly based on platforms and things that you're using within your districts. So our format for this evening, we're going to do a quick connector before we dive into any content. We'll have a short burst of mini learning tonight, and then we really want to give you the bulk of the time to network so that you can discuss with their colleagues and share ideas. And then we'll give you an opportunity to share out what your next steps might be after tonight. So a little bit about me. My husband and I own a pizzeria, so pizza is a big part of our life. And I love these matrix scales because they're quick and they're fun, and they're really easy to do, especially with kids. So on the pizza scale tonight, which pizza are you? So go ahead and place your pizza number in the box. Oh no, I'm seeing a 3. Some 8s, a 5, not done. More 3s. A 4. Okay, someone's the school pizza lunch, the square pizza that we used to all get in elementary school, the bagel bites. Lots of 8s. No one seems to be the controversial pineapple pizza. I don't know how you feel about it, but it's, I have to really be in the mood for the pineapple on the pizza. Would anyone like to unmute and share? Okay, I get that, Alexa, just feeling burnt at the moment. I get it. Lots of burnt out feeling. I get it. I get it. So today we're going to talk about formative assessment and feedback. And really, I'm not going to bore you with the research. We know that formative assessment is a high leverage practice when implemented in a planned, ongoing way, an intentional way. So I wanted to point out that Dylan Willem, famous formative assessment research, he really describes these 5 strategies that help to make up the formative assessment process. That first one is really all about like clarifying and sharing the learning intentions or the learning targets, and then what success will look like, which is that success criteria. So how do we know when we are successful on those learning targets? He also talks about effective classroom discussions and activities and tasks that really elicit evidence of learning from the students. And his third point is all around providing feedback that moves the learning forward. And that's what we're going to really focus on today. But he also talks about activating students as instructional resources for one another. So it's that really getting into that peer-to-peer feedback and even peer-to-peer critique. But then, and lastly, he talks about activating learners of their own learning. So really engaging students in the process of it. And so all of these things kind of come together and they help to really make feedback a really, really effective high leverage strategy that you can use in your classrooms. So when we talk about feedback, we really put it into a couple of different buckets. One, that feedback that is unhelpful to the learner, and then feedback that is helpful to the learner. And things that aren't helpful to a learner are feedback that does the thinking for the student. So if you've ever gotten a paperback and it's marked up with red ink, and then you're just going to do the corrections, the teacher's really done the heavy lifting, right? You just have to go back and do the corrections and then turn it back in for the points or for the grade. Feedback that summarizes achievement. So getting a paperback that has an A, an F, or points, so 15 out of 20, all of those things, it really doesn't help the learner move forward. And then the last part is that feedback that is generic or intended to make the student feel good. So these are things like, good job, way to go, you did it, nice try. And while those things have a purpose, they really don't help the student move forward in their learning. They don't provide a path. So we really want feedback that's helpful for our learners, and things like providing opportunities to make improvements or adjustments, providing specificity to the learner on what needs to be improved or changed. And this is often in the form of a question. So it could be something like, I really like the strategy that you utilized today. How might that be different if you did? Or tell me more about your thinking. What do you think the reader might glean from? And then lastly, feedback that really provides a path for improvement. So we really want a pathway or students to see that the learning doesn't stop. Often when they see a grade or a comment or even just a generic good job or even a sticker, the learning kind of stops and they become stagnant and stalled. So we want a path to provide opportunities for students to make that improvement, but also opportunities to take action. It's one thing to give a student some feedback and then there isn't any ample time for them to move on it. And the last part is that students know how to use that feedback and they can move themselves forward. So some of the tips that Laura and I put together today to just try to make feedback really manageable in a virtual, either synchronous or even asynchronous setting, is to really look for trends across that student work to provide feedback in a global way. So if you have given an assignment or a task and you look at all of it, look for patterns or trends and that you can give to the whole group. Consider your learning target too. So prioritize and determine what is actually feasible for the student to actually address in a given amount of time, especially if you're not in a face-to-face or you're in a hybrid format. Be selective and be specific. You don't need to mark up the whole essay, especially if you're only looking at one piece. And that's another tip. Look for small chunks to give feedback on that are really going to push the student towards the intended learning target. You don't have to look at the whole paper for grammar, claim, evidence, spelling, but really look for those things that kids really have to know. So evidence, claims, reasoning, if that's where the learning target is, they'll have opportunities to get the grammar and that spelling in other places, especially if it is a typed essay. So just be selective and specific. And then consider your students where they are at when they're learning. And really consider that feedback isn't a one size fits all, meaning that not every student needs the same amount of feedback all at the same time. I taught middle school and I had over 100 kids, and there was no way I had time to read all 100 essays. So I would look for specific students that I needed to target because they might have been my most needy student. And I would provide opportunities and written comments for them, or we would do one-on-one conferencing. So just consider who your students are and the relationship that you have with your students, and consider what they need at that time to move themselves forward in that learning. Celebrate success. We can't forget, even though it's really hard right now and we're doing a lot and we're working really crazy hours, but just celebrate the success because your students feel that on the other side of that screen. And then the last part is really important, is we want to engage our students in that feedback process. We want to ask them questions so that we can get them their student voice and we can get them thinking about what they might do next. And that really will help with that self-efficacy and that self-regulation so that they actually know how to use that feedback.
So what we wanted to do tonight is just walk you through some of the digital tools that you can use to provide feedback. And I'm sure you're familiar with some of them, but we're hoping to introduce you to a couple of new ones, or maybe just a unique way of using those. So when you think about the technology tools that we have at our disposal, we've got plenty of ways to type comments. We can use some of those whiteboard types of programs or applications like Jamboard, Padlet. We can type comments into Google or Word documents. We have the ability to provide audio and video feedback through things like Flipgrid, Screencastify, voice typing, or Vocaroo. And finally, we can use things like Zoom or Google Meet or Teams to meet either one-on-one with our students or in small groups. So you can use these tools in some unique ways to give that, that very formative feedback, but also share those opportunities for conversations with our students. So the first one that, like I said, is probably the most familiar, one of the most common ways to use or to employ typed comments is through something like the comments feature in Google Docs. You can also use the comments feature in Word documents. The nice thing about typing in a comment and highlighting it is that you're really not changing their writing. You're just pointing out, somewhere where they might need to address something specific. What Heather said resonates so much with me because as a very, beginning in the very early parts of teaching, I thought the most important thing I could do was correct their writing. So I would write over the top of it. I would cross things out. I would have new sentences. I think I've shared with some of you that I had a student come up and say, "Did I do anything right?" And it made me feel so bad because that wasn't my intention at all. But I was trying so hard to give them all of this feedback. And in that made them feel like they hadn't really accomplished much correctly. But like I said, you can use either of these comments features in either type of Word document to help students. And it doesn't have to be a statement. It can be a question, which is a really great place for them to just start thinking about what changes might I want to make. The next one is Padlet. And a lot of us are familiar with Padlet as kind of a discussion board type of, we can like in this situation, we have a story that the students are reading and they can post responses or, and we can give as teachers feedback to them, in this format. But I want you to think about the fact that students can also upload documents or images or videos. And by simply hitting that plus sign, you've opened up the possibility that students can respond to those documents or videos. So you give both teachers and students kind of a unique way to provide feedback to each other using Padlet.
So this is a Jamboard, and Jamboard is a Google extension. It's very easy to use, and it's kind of just like a giant chart paper that you can add stickies to, or you can add images to. And this is actually an example of a Jamboard done by a science team. And the science teachers created a question or a phenomena. And these were just some of the questions that students had. And what the teachers did, they took it a step further and they actually asked the students to comment on other students' questions or their thinking. So this is just another opportunity that you can provide feedback. You can create these, you can give each student an individual board and they can put their work on their own board. This could be done in a small group where students are commenting on each other's work, or you as the teacher can go in and put a sticky note and put your comments again next to the work.
Another way that you can provide students with feedback is through audio or video comments. And just this weekend, I was reading a research article that was shared with Heather and me about that difference in an audio or video format. When we read typed comments, just like we read emails or texts, sometimes we have to interpret tone or emotion, intention sometimes. But the nice thing about audio and video comments is we do have kind of that personalized approach. And because you hear the tone, you can hear the points of emphasis by the person who's created those comments. Students have a little bit more of a feeling as though they're talking with that teacher and getting that feedback kind of one-on-one. So some of the ways that you can, or some of the programs you can use are Vocaroo, which is a free online resource that you can create a link and share that audio comment. Screencastify is also a free program where you can create a screencast, which allows you to capture the screen and guide the student with comments on what you're seeing. And finally, Flipgrid, which I know a lot of you are familiar with, but it's another way that we can move those conversations, or at least simulate those conversations and make them more immediate and personal. So with something like Flipgrid, students can record videos and comment on other videos. Teachers can feedback on student videos. If you've followed Penny Kittle and Kelly Gallagher, they have a cross-country Flipgrid going on with peers giving peers feedback, which is really wonderful because these peers have an opportunity to read the piece that the student has written and really think about how they want to provide very, kind of detailed and well thought out feedback to each other. So it's a great way to, again, personalize that feedback and let the student really see you while you're providing it.
So this is an example of an audio comment with Screencastify. The student was given a mathematics task, and the task was actually around a computer animation program, and what would a student need to do to make the next size square, and could they come up with an equation to do so? So the student's work is actually on the right-hand side, and the teacher utilized Screencastify. So let me get that going for you.
Hi, Josiah. Thanks for sharing your thinking. I can see that you put some charts together that really helped organize the information for green, for blue, and for red. I'm just going to direct you back to the task. We're looking for what are the rules that determine how many green, blue, and red squares are needed to make a main square. So maybe you ran out of time, or maybe if I just ask a couple of questions, it can help get you started, and then you can go ahead and turn this back to me. So I'm wondering if we look here at blue, if we can write a rule, or you could write a rule so that the side length would help me determine how many blue squares. So what would I have to do with the number that is the side length? in order to determine how many blue squares. And the patterns that you've noticed over here are going to be a good start for thinking about what that rule might be. You might want to ask yourself to test it. Like if I didn't have the picture, but I had a side length of 20, how many blue squares would that be? Or if I had a side length of 43, how many blue squares would that be? How could I write a rule that would help me determine that without the picture in front of me? I look forward to seeing your thinking. Thanks, Josiah.
So what I really love about the teacher's feedback is it was a lot of comments, but she also did a lot of questioning. She asked a lot of questions that referred Josiah back to his work on a path that would lead him to figuring it out. And she noted that that he was on the right track, but he perhaps just ran out of time and was kind of nudging him a little bit to finish the work. So Screencastify is a nice tool that you can use to provide that feedback, but you can also hear her tone, which is really important. Another way that you can leave audio or video comments is the voice typing feature that's available in a Google Doc. So if you were to open up your Google Doc, if a student is working in a Google Doc, you can actually put your cursor into the doc. If you have editing rights, you can go to tools and you can do voice typing. So you don't actually have to hand type every comment, but that you could actually speak into the microphone and it'll leave the comments or the questions that you want the student to consider right in the document themselves.
And the final one that we wanted to show you when it comes to audio and video comments is Vocaroo. And you just go to vocaroo.com. I'll put that link in there in just a second. And you see a little microphone icon. And once you press it, it starts recording. And then once you're done recording the comment, you can see in the lower image that you're able to get a link, which you could link directly into the comments feature in either Google Docs or Word Docs, or you could share it via QR code. You could embed it, you could download it to an MP3. So you've got a lot of different options for sharing it. So it's just nice because it captures just those voice recordings and like Heather said, it's just nice because you can use that as an opportunity to ask some questions, like she pointed out with Screencastify. And the other thing that I wanted to say about Screencastify before I forget is that those of you with Google access to Google Drive, or you've got a Gmail account, Screencastify creates its own folder in your Google Drive. So not only is it easy for you to find the screencasts that you've created, but it's also very easy to share those with students via link. So both of those offer nice opportunities to personalize your comments. And the final thing that we wanted to just remind you about is that you can use, obviously, phones. You can actually talk, via cell phone with students about their work. You can set up a video conference. And one of the things that we talked with teachers about last summer was thinking about blocking out time, maybe creating a Google document where students can put their name into a specific time slot, as you can see with the little grid over to the right, and maybe allocate a certain amount of time for group conferences and a certain amount of time for individual conferences, so that students would have the choice to do one or the other. We know we can't give detailed comments on every single activity, project, written piece that students turn in. So when we do something like these one-on-one or small group conferences, we really want to think about does this lead to a performance-based assessment, for example, or a performance task of some kind where they would really need that time to workshop their work with you. So it's not something I want to urge not something that you want to think about doing every single week. That would become exhaustive.
So we wanted to show you an example of a student piece. So I found a piece of student writing. This is actually my daughter's writing that I found pretty recently. She's a third grader. And how might you consider giving feedback using Vocaroo? So I asked Laura to put her teacher hat back on and provide the feedback to Aubrey, though she's named Sally in the recording, around what she might do next with her story. So I'm going to play the Vocaroo.
Hi, Sally. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your dialogue draft with me. I like that you're using dialogue to reveal both the characters' emotions as well as the importance of the event. And I also like that you work to capture realistic sounding dialogue. This sounds like a real conversation to me. One thing that I'd like you to work on in this draft is making sure that only the dialogue uses quotation marks. For example, all of the kids went down fast seems to be a descriptive detail, so you would not use quotation marks around it. Do you see any other sentences that might also be descriptive details? The other thing that I would like you to work on is punctuation. In the beginning of each quotation, you'll want to make sure that you use a capital letter. You'll also want to include an end mark. The end marks for quotations are the same as with sentences, so be sure to add a period, an exclamation point, or a question mark. Finally, if you follow the quotation with something like I said or he said, you'll need to add a comma before the end quotation mark. For example, when you use okay, I said, you'll place the comma right after the word okay. I'm looking forward to your revisions, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me.
So we wanted to give you an opportunity to get into breakout rooms with colleagues to see what other people are using in terms of giving feedback, if there are any digital tools that you're currently using that are working really well for you, or if there's a digital tool that you might want to try that you just learned this evening. We're going to join breakout rooms too, so we'd love to help and support. And I think Laura's putting in the chat, digital tools to try document. And Michelle, I think, is going to move us into breakout rooms shortly. Go ahead, Laura.
Well, I was just going to tell you that the link to the document has more digital tools than just those focusing on feedback. So always feel free to use any of them. They have a sample and a tutorial for most of the tools included.